Your apartment is closer to the airport. My sister texted at 11 at night. I am dropping off my 4 kids for 2 weeks. It was a command, not a question. When I replied that I was working, she fired back that our mother had my spare key. My stomach dropped. I immediately called the front desk with strict instructions to change my locks. By the time they arrived the next morning, my home was no longer their backup plan. My name is Harper James, and at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, I was not a sister, a daughter, or an aunt. I was a ghost in my own machine, a biological component of a digital system that had finally, mercifully, powered down. The silence in my apartment on the 33rd floor was absolute. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Seattle rain smeared the city lights into long, weeping streaks of neon and gray, but inside, the air was conditioned, filtered, and still. I had just closed the lid of my work laptop, a heavy-duty machine issued by Strataline Air Operations, marking the end of a 14-hour shift that had required every ounce of my cognitive function. As the operations lead, my job was not merely to watch planes move across a map, it was to predict chaos before it happened. I managed crew logistics, emergency reroutes, and the delicate high-stakes ballet of keeping thousands of tons of aluminum in the air and on schedule. It was a job that demanded precision. It was a job that did not forgive mistakes, and it was a job that required sleep. My body felt heavy, sinking into the ergonomic mesh of my office chair. The only light in the room came from the blinking standby LED on my monitor and the faint, amber glow of the street lamps far below. I rubbed my temples, feeling the dull throb of a headache beginning to recede. All I needed was 8 hours. Just 8 hours of unconsciousness before the special operations cycle began the next morning. Tomorrow was not a normal day. It was the quarterly system migration, a period of heightened vulnerability where I would be the primary failsafe. If I was groggy, if my reaction time was slowed by even a fraction of a second, the ripple effects could cost the company millions, or worse, compromise safety protocols. I stood up, my joints popping, and turned toward the kitchen to pour a glass of water. That was when my personal phone, lying face down on the granite island, buzzed. It was a single, short vibration, violent against the stone. I almost ignored it. At 11 at night, nothing good ever comes through a text message. It is either a wrong number, a drunken confession, or an emergency. Given my family history, I usually braced myself for the latter. I picked up the phone. The screen was blindingly bright in the dim room. The name at the top read Ara, my younger sister. There was no greeting. There was no, "How are you?" or "Are you awake?" There was just a block of text that hit me with the force of a physical blow. Your apartment is closer to the airport. The message read, I am dropping off my 4 kids for 2 weeks. I stared at the words. I read them again. I read them a third time, trying to find the question mark. I looked for the request. I looked for the courtesy, but there was none. It was a statement of fact. It was a decree issued from the chaotic kingdom of her life, fully expecting to annex the orderly territory of mine. My thumb hovered over the screen. My heart rate, which had finally settled after the stress of the workday, spiked. 4 kids. Kara had 4 children under the age of 10. They were loud. They were destructive. And they were currently being weaponized against my solitude. And 2 weeks. That was not a visit. That was an occupation. I typed back. My fingers stiff. I cannot do that. I am working. I will not even be here during the day. I hit send and watched the little bubble appear instantly. She was watching the screen. She was waiting. Her reply came 3 seconds later. It chilled me faster than the air conditioning ever could. Mom has your spare key. She is letting us in. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. I stood frozen in the middle of my living room, the room that I paid for, the room that I kept immaculate, the room that contained thousands of dollars of sensitive electronic equipment, stacks of confidential flight manifests, and precisely 0 toys. Mom has your spare key. The memory surfaced, sharp and bitter. 3 years ago, I had given our mother, Sharon, a spare key. I had done it during a rare moment of vulnerability, right after I had bought the place. Just for emergencies, I had told her. In case I get locked out, or if there is a fire. I had handed over that piece of metal as a gesture of trust, a symbol that despite the friction between us, she was still my mother. I had foolishly believed that emergency meant a burst pipe or a medical crisis. I did not realize that in my family, emergency was a synonym for inconvenience. They were going to let themselves in. I looked around my apartment. It was a space designed for one adult woman who valued order above all else. My white leather sofa was pristine. My glass coffee table was sharp-edged and currently held a fragile ceramic sculpture I had bought in Portland. My workspace, the nerve center of my career, was right there in the open, with cables and hard drives that could be yanked out by a curious toddler in less than 2 seconds. This was not a safe space for children. But more importantly, this was my space. Panic began to rise in my throat, hot and acidic. If they had the key, they could be here at any moment. The airport was only 20 minutes away. They could be in a cab right now. They could be in the elevator. I imagined the sound of the key turning in the lock. I imagined the door swinging open. I imagined the noise, the screaming, the stomping, the inevitable crash of something breaking, shattering the silence I needed to survive the next day. I looked at the time, 11:05 at night. If I argued with Kara, she would guilt-trip me. She would talk about how tired she was, how expensive hotels were, how family helps family. If I called Mom, she would cry. She would tell me I was being selfish, that I had so much space and Kara had so little. They would wear me down. That was their strategy. They relied on the fact that it is socially unacceptable to say no to a mother and a sister in distress. They relied on my exhaustion. They relied on my shame. But tonight, I was not just a sister. I was an operations lead. And in operations, when a security breach is imminent, you do not negotiate with the breach. You lock it down. I did not reply to Kara. I did not call my mother. Instead, I walked over to the wall intercom and pressed the button for the 24-hour concierge desk. Front desk. This is David. A calm voice answered. David, this is Harper James in Unit 33B, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat, metallic, devoid of the panic that was thrashing around in my chest. I have a security emergency. Is everything all right, Ms. James? Do you need police assistance? No, I said. I need a locksmith. I need you to send the building's emergency locksmith up to my unit immediately. I need my cylinders changed tonight. There was a pause on the line. Tonight, Ms. James, it is after 11. The emergency surcharge is... I do not care about the cost. I cut him off. Just get them up here. And David... Yes, ma'am. I need to update my authorized guest list effective immediately. Please remove Sharon Bennett and Kara Bennett from the access logs. If anyone by those names attempts to access the elevators or the spare key holding, they are to be denied entry. Is that clear? Understood, David said, his professional tone tightening. I will strike them from the list. I will call the locksmith now. He should be on site within 20 minutes. Thank you. I released the button and stepped back. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. This was the nuclear option. This was the act of war. Changing the locks was not a passive rejection. It was an active revocation of access. It was a physical barrier that said, "You do not have the right." I paced the length of the living room, waiting, every minute stretched out like an hour. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting the handle to turn before the locksmith arrived. I felt like a fugitive in my own home, barricaded against the people who were supposed to love me. Why did it have to be this way? Why did they force me to be the villain? I walked to the window and looked out at the rain-slicked city. Seattle looked beautiful from this height, a grid of amber and white lights breathing in the darkness. I had worked so hard for this view. I had worked double shifts, holidays, and weekends. I had missed weddings and funerals to build a career that afforded me this sanctuary. I paid the mortgage. I paid the exorbitant HOA fees. I paid the insurance. And yet, my sister felt entitled to commandeer it via text message. My mother felt entitled to hand out access to it like a party favor. They saw my success not as an achievement to be respected, but as a resource to be harvested. To them, I was not a person with a job and a life. I was a warehouse with a pulse. I was a backup generator that they could plug into whenever their own power went out, regardless of whether I had any energy left to give. A knock at the door made me jump. I moved to the peephole. It was a man in blue coveralls holding a red toolbox. The locksmith. I opened the door. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "No problem, ma'am," he said, eyeing me briefly. He looked tired, too. "You want the deadbolt and the handle replaced?" "Yes," I said. "Both. I need to be the only person on this planet with a key to this door." He nodded, sensing the tension, and set to work. The sound of the drill was loud in the quiet hallway. It was a harsh, grinding noise, the sound of metal eating metal. I stood there and watched him, arms crossed over my chest, supervising the destruction of the old lock. As he worked, I thought about the text message again. I am dropping off my 4 kids, not asking if I was home, not asking if I was busy, just dropping them off. Like laundry, like luggage. If I had not been awake, if I had been in a deep sleep, I might have woken up tomorrow morning to the sound of strangers in my hallway. I might have walked out of my bedroom to find my living room colonized, my work files scattered, my sanctuary breached. The thought made me nauseous. The locksmith pulled the old cylinder out. It fell to the floor with a heavy clatter. "That is the old one out," he muttered. "Putting the new one in now. High security pins. Nobody is picking this." "Good," I whispered. I checked my phone again. Another text from Kara. "We are in the Uber. Traffic is light. See you in 40 minutes. 40 minutes. They were on their way. They were actually coming. I felt a surge of cold resolve. Let them come. Let them arrive at the lobby. Let them march up to the desk with their suitcases and their entitlement. Let them ask for the key. They were about to learn a lesson that I should have taught them years ago. The locksmith finished 20 minutes later. He handed me 2 shiny silver keys. They felt heavy in my palm. They felt cold. They felt like freedom. "That will be $350, he said. "Do you want to put it on the unit account?" "Yes," I said. "Put it on the account." He packed up his tools and left, the elevator dinging softly as he descended. I stood alone in the hallway for a moment, staring at the new lock. It looked identical to the old one from the outside, but inside, the mechanism was completely different, the old key. The key my mother carried in her purse like a weapon was now just a useless piece of jagged metal. I stepped back inside my apartment and closed the door. I turned the deadbolt. Click, a solid, heavy sound. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. I was safe. They could not get in. No matter how much they banged on the door, no matter how much they screamed at the concierge, they could not cross this threshold. But as the relief washed over me, it was followed by a profound, aching sadness. I realized then that I was not smiling. I was not happy. I was grieving. I was grieving the family I wished I had, a family that would ask before they visited, a family that would respect my work, a family that would see me as a human being, not a utility. I looked at the text message one last time. "See you in 40 minutes, and then I engaged the mute switch on the side of my phone. I walked back to the window. The reflection in the glass showed a woman who was tired, pale, and alone, but she was safe. I whispered into the empty room, the words hanging in the recycled air. "If they can get into my house without my permission," I said to the rain, "it means this house was never mine to begin with." I turned off the lights in the living room, leaving the apartment in darkness. I had a shift tomorrow. I had to protect the operation. I had to protect myself. And for the first time in my life, I had actually done it. I went to my bedroom and closed the door. I did not know what the morning would bring. I did not know what kind of scene they would cause in the lobby, but I knew one thing for certain. Tonight, I would sleep, and the only keys to my life were finally, truly, in my own hands. I stood in the center of my living room. the smell of metallic shavings from the drill still faint in the air. The silence I had fought so hard to secure was finally mine, but my mind was loud. It was racing backward, rewinding through 33 years of history to find the exact moment when my family decided that I was not a person, but a resource to the outside world. I am Harper James, the 33-year-old operations lead at Stratline Air Operations. I am the woman who bought her own condo in a high-rise overlooking the Seattle skyline. I am the woman who drives a paid-off sedan, wears tailored blazers, and has a credit score that sits comfortably in the 800s. I am the success story. That is the label my mother uses at church potlucks and grocery store run-ins. Harper is doing so well, she tells people, beaming with a pride that she did not earn. She is so independent, but inside the four walls of the Bennett family dynamic. Independent is just a polite synonym for available. My sister, Kara, is 30, 3 years younger than me, but she lives in a different universe. Kara has 4 children, all under the age of 10, and a husband named Dylan who is perpetually 1 month away from his big break. Dylan does not believe in the 9-to-5 grind. He believes in the hustle. Over the last 6 years, I have watched him cycle through drop-shipping cheap electronics from overseas, day trading cryptocurrency with money they did not have, and attempting to launch a lifestyle brand for modern warriors. None of these ventures have ever turned a profit. They are black holes that consume time and capital, leaving Kara to manage the chaos of 4 children while drowning in late notices. It is easy to look at them and feel pity. I did, for a long time. But pity in my family is a trap. My mother, Sharon, is the architect of this dysfunction. She has spent her entire life curating the image of the sacrificial matriarch. She is the kind of woman who sighs loudly when she sits down, ensuring everyone knows just how tired she is from loving them so much. Her favorite phrase, the mantra etched into the foundation of our childhood, is simple. Family helps family. It sounds noble. It sounds kind. But in practice, it is a socialist redistribution of energy where the competent are punished for their stability and the chaotic are rewarded for their mess. My father, Ray, is the silent partner in this enterprise. He is a man who learned decades ago that the path of least resistance is to simply say nothing. He sits in his recliner, watching the news, letting the storm of my mother's guilt-tripping rage around him. He thinks his silence is neutral. He thinks that by not taking a side, he is keeping the peace. He does not understand that his silence is an endorsement. Every time he looks down at his newspaper while my mother demands I open my wallet, he is signing the check alongside her. The dynamic started long before I had a salary. It began when we were teenagers. I was the older sister, the responsible one. If I wanted a car, I worked 2 summers at a dairy freeze to buy a beat-up Honda. If I wanted to go to college, I filled out the loan applications and worked the night shift at the library. Kara was different. Kara was sensitive. Kara was overwhelmed. When Kara wanted a car, my parents co-signed a lease because she needed reliable transport for school. When Kara dropped out of community college after 1 semester because it was too stressful, they let her move back in rent-free so she could find herself. I paid my tuition. She got a down payment. I paid my rent. She got her groceries covered. I never complained. I told myself that I was building character. I told myself that I was proud of doing it on my own. I did not realize that I was being groomed. I was being trained to believe that my needs were secondary because I was capable of meeting them myself. The financial bleed began the year I got my first promotion at Stratline. It was subtle at first. A text from Kara saying she was short on diapers. A call from my mother saying Dylan's car had broken down and he couldn't get to a job interview. It is just $50, I would tell myself. It is just $200. I would send the money. I would get a thank you followed by 3 heart emojis, and I would feel a warm, fleeting sense of being a good sister. But then the requests grew. The once in a while became once a month, then once a week. I remember a specific Tuesday 2 years ago. I was saving for a new laptop, a high-performance machine I needed for some freelance consulting I was doing on the side. I had $3,000 set aside. Kara called me, hysterical. They were going to shut off their power. Dylan had invested the utility money in a guaranteed sports betting algorithm. "Harper, please," she had sobbed. "The kids will freeze. It is winter. You can't let your nieces and nephews freeze." I paid the bill. It was $450. A week later, I saw photos on Facebook of Kara and Dylan at a concert. VIP tickets. The caption read, "Much needed date night." When I confronted my mother about it, she turned it back on me. "Oh, Harper, stop counting pennies. Your sister is under so much stress. She needs to blow off steam. You make good money. Why are you so stingy?" That was the moment the label attached itself to me. Stingy, cold, selfish, because I did not have children. My time and my money were viewed as public domain. In their eyes, my life was a vacuum of responsibility. I did not have to buy school clothes. I did not have to pay for daycare. Therefore, my income was extra. My sleep was optional. "You don't understand what it is like," Kara would say whenever I tried to set a boundary. "You come home to a quiet apartment. You can nap whenever you want. You have no idea how hard real life is." Real life, as if my 14-hour shifts keeping airplanes from colliding mid-air were imaginary, as if navigating corporate politics and managing a team of 20 people was a hobby, as if paying a mortgage entirely on my own was a game. I became the family ATM. But an ATM that they resented using. They hated needing me. So they made sure to insult me while they took the cash. It was a defense mechanism. If they could convince themselves that I was a bad person, a greedy, heartless corporate drone, then they didn't have to feel grateful. They were just taking reparations. I tried to stop. 6 months ago, I told them no. Kara wanted money for a deposit on a new rental house because they had been evicted from the last one. I told her I couldn't do it. I told her I was saving for my own emergency fund. The backlash was immediate and nuclear. My mother called me crying, asking where she had gone wrong in raising a daughter who cared more about a bank balance than her own flesh and blood. My father mumbled that I should just help them out this one last time, to stop the yelling. I caved. I always caved. I sent the money. I was not a sister. I was a contingency plan with a checking account. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the request was not for money. It was for my sanctuary. As I looked at the new keys sitting on my kitchen counter, a specific memory clawed its way to the surface. It was the memory of the spare key. 3 years ago, right after I closed on this apartment, my mother had come over for a tour. She had walked through the rooms, touching everything, critiquing the paint color, asking how much the HOA fees were. At the end of the visit, I had handed her a shiny new key. "Here," I had said, "for emergencies. In case I get hit by a bus or lock myself out." I remembered the way her hand had closed around it. She hadn't said thank you. She had just nodded, slipping it into her purse as if it belonged there, as if she was reclaiming a piece of property that I was merely borrowing. Over the years, I had asked for it back a few times, usually when I was doing a purge of who had access to my life. "Mom, can I get that spare key back? I am updating my security," I would say. "Oh, I left it in my other purse," she would reply, or, "Why do you not trust your own mother?" She would deflect, she would delay, and eventually, I would drop it because it wasn't worth the fight. I told myself it didn't matter. She lived 40 minutes away. She never came into the city. What was she going to do with it? Now I knew. She was keeping it for this moment. She was holding on to it like a sleeper agent waiting for the activation code. The code was Kara's latest crisis. The realization made my skin crawl. That key was not a safety measure for me. It was a backdoor for them. It was their assurance that no matter how high I climbed, no matter how many locks I turned, they could always let themselves in. They could always breach the perimeter. I walked over to the kitchen island and picked up a stack of mail I had been ignoring. Bills, flyers, and a bank statement. I ripped it open. The numbers were black and stark. I had savings. I had investments. I had a retirement plan. Kara had chaos. She had 4 children she couldn't afford, and a husband who refused to work a standard job. And my mother had a narrative that said it was my duty to fix it. But looking at the clock, watching the minutes tick closer to their arrival, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just anger, it was clarity. They weren't coming to visit. You don't visit with 6 suitcases and a one-way ticket mentality. You don't text at 11 at night for a visit. They were coming to stay. They were coming to consume. I thought about my office, the room next to the bedroom. It was filled with sensitive documents, charts of flight paths, employee records. If Kara's kids got in there, if they spilled juice on my server, if they drew on my manifests, I could lose my job. And if I lost my job, the Bank of Harper would close anyway. They didn't care about that. They couldn't see past their own immediate need. They were like locusts, swarming from one crisis to the next, devouring everything in their path before moving on. And I was the greenest field they knew. I sat down on my pristine white sofa, the one Kara would have undoubtedly let her children jump on with shoes, and I whispered to myself, "Not this time." I had spent my entire adult life paying for the crime of being competent. I had paid in dollars, in sleep, and in self-esteem. I had allowed them to convince me that my boundaries were acts of violence. But changing the locks, that was a physical reality they could not gaslight away. When they arrived downstairs, when they tried to breeze past the concierge, they were going to hit a wall made of steel and policy. My phone buzzed again. I didn't look at it, but I knew who it was. The 40 minutes were up. They were here. I felt a phantom weight in my pocket, the phantom weight of the checkbook I usually reached for. But tonight, my pockets were empty. My door was bolted, and for the first time in 33 years, I was not going to be the one to fix it. I was the villain in their story. Yes, I knew that script by heart, but as I stared at the rain hitting the glass, I realized that being the villain in their story was the only way to be the hero in mine. The intercom buzzed, a long, insistent sound that tore through the quiet apartment. It began. To understand why I changed the locks on a Tuesday night, you have to understand the Sunday dinner that happened 2 days prior. It was the catalyst, the final straw that broke something fundamental inside of me, though I did not realize it until I was standing in the dark with a locksmith. The drive to my parents' house in the suburbs of Seattle was always a 40-minute exercise in mental bracing. I would turn off the radio, grip the steering wheel, and breathe. I was preparing myself for the noise. My apartment was a temple of silence. My parents' house was a cacophony designed to shatter thought. I arrived at 5 in the afternoon. The driveway was already blocked by Dylan's truck, a lifted monstrosity that consumed gas at a rate that made me wince. I had to park my sedan on the street, 2 houses down, because the driveway was reserved for family vehicles, and apparently, my car did not count because it did not transport grandchildren. I walked up the path, the sound of the television already audible through the closed front door. Inside, the volume was set to a level that vibrated the floorboards. Cartoons, always cartoons. I opened the door and stepped into the wall of heat and noise. The air smelled of pot roast and stale laundry. 4 children, my nieces and nephews, were sprinting in circles around the living room island, screaming at a pitch that pierced right through my skull. My father, Ray, sat in his recliner, staring at the 60-inch screen, completely disassociated from the chaos around him. He did not look up when I entered. He just turned the volume up 2 notches to drown out the kids. "Harper is here," one of the kids yelled, not as a greeting, but as an alert. My mother, Sharon, walked out of the kitchen wiping her hands on a dish towel. She did not say hello. She did not ask how my week was. She did not ask about the major audit I had just survived at Strataline. "Kara needs new tires," she said. That was the opening line. No preamble, no warmth, just the invoice. I took off my coat and hung it on the rack, fighting the urge to turn around and walk back out. "Hello to you too, Mom," I said, keeping my voice even. "I am fine. Thanks for asking. Don't get snippy," she snapped, turning back to the kitchen. "I am serious. She was driving over here and the tread is completely gone. It is dangerous. You do not want your nieces and nephews riding around on bald tires. Do you? I followed her into the kitchen. Kara was sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone while her youngest child tugged at her sleeve. Dylan was leaning against the counter, also on his phone. Neither of them looked up. How much? I asked. It was a reflex, a conditioned response trained into me over a decade of guilt. $600, Sharon said. And that is for the cheap ones. Dylan found a deal. I looked at Dylan. You found a deal, I said. But you can't pay for the deal. Dylan shrugged, finally glancing up. His eyes were glazed over, the look of a man who had checked out of his own life years ago. Cash flow is tight this month. Harper, the crypto market is in a dip. It will bounce back next week, but we need the tires now. The crypto market, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Dylan, you have 4 children. Why are you relying on a volatile market for basic vehicle maintenance? Don't start, Kara cut in. Her voice was sharp, defensive. She finally looked at me, and I saw the familiar mix of exhaustion and resentment in her eyes. You always do this. You come in here with your judgy tone and your designer purse and act like you are better than us. I am not acting like I am better, I said. I am asking why I am being asked to pay $600 within 30 seconds of walking through the door. Because you have it, Kara said. It was a simple statement of fact to her. Must be nice. You just have to go to work, sit in an air-conditioned office, and watch planes on a screen. You do not live in the real world like we do. You do not have to buy diapers. You do not have to pay for swimming lessons. Must be nice, I echoed. The phrase triggered a spike of adrenaline in my chest. Must be nice. As if my life was a vacation. As if I did not work the graveyard shift 3 times a week, so that our trans-Pacific flights had coverage. As if I had not spent my 20s studying while Kara was partying. As if I did not have a mortgage, insurance, and my own retirement to fund. I work 50 hours a week, Kara, I said, my voice tightening. I manage the safety of thousands of passengers. If I mess up, planes crash. That is the real world. Oh. Please, Sharon interrupted, slamming a pot of mashed potatoes onto the table. Stop being so dramatic. You sit at a desk. Kara is raising 4 human beings. That is the hardest job in the world. Now sit down and eat. We sat. The table was crowded. The kids were loud, throwing peas and yelling over each other. Dylan ate in silence, his phone propped up against the napkin holder so he could watch a sports game. I looked around the table. This was my family, and I was completely alone. So, Sharon said, spooning gravy onto my father's plate. I was talking to Aunt Linda yesterday. You know her daughter, Jessica, the one who moved to Florida. I know her, I said, stabbing a piece of carrot. Well, Jessica put Linda in a home, Sharon said, her voice dripping with disdain. Can you imagine? After all Linda did for her, raised her, paid for her wedding, and she just dumps her in a facility. I knew where this was going. I kept eating, eyes on my plate. I told Linda that would never happen to us, Sharon continued, looking directly at me. I told her we have Harper. I stopped chewing. The room seemed to go quiet, though I knew the TV was still blaring. What did you tell her? I asked. I told her that you are the successful one, Sharon said, smiling a smile that did not reach her eyes. You have the big apartment. You have the savings. When Ray and I get too old to manage this house, we will just move in with you. You have plenty of room. It was not a request. It was a proclamation. She had announced my future to the extended family as if it were a signed contract. Mom, I said, putting my fork down. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment. It is 800 square feet. So you can upgrade. She waved her hand dismissively. With your salary, you could buy a big house with an in-law suite. You just choose not to because you want to spend your money on whatever it is you spend it on. Fancy coffees and vacations. I haven't been on a vacation in 4 years, I said. See? Kara chimed in, leaning over to wipe ketchup off her son's face. You have plenty of money then. You just hoard it. I am saving for my future, I said. For my retirement. I am not a pension fund. That is selfish, Sharon said. The word hung in the air, heavy and ugly. Family helps family. We sacrificed everything for you girls, and now that you have made it, you think you can just abandon us. I looked at my father. Dad, do you agree with this? Am I just a retirement plan to you? Ray chewed slowly. He looked at Sharon, then at his plate. Your mother is just worried about the future. Harper, don't upset her. Pass the salt. Pass the salt. That was his contribution. He saw his wife dismantling his daughter's autonomy, laying claim to her financial future, and his only concern was the seasoning on his potatoes. I looked at Dylan. He was smirking slightly, just a tiny curl of the lip as he watched the game. He enjoyed this. He enjoyed seeing the rich sister getting taken down a peg. It made him feel better about his own failures. If I was selfish, then his incompetence was virtuous. I can't believe this, I whispered. What? Sharon asked, sharp. What can't you believe that we expect you to care about your family? I can't believe that you think you own me, I said. My voice was shaking, but I forced it to be steady. I am 33 years old. I have built a life that I pay for, and you sit here, eating the food that I probably paid for last week, and tell me that my only purpose is to serve you. You are hysterical, Kara said, rolling her eyes. Nobody said they own you. We just said you should help. You have the resources. Why is it so hard for you to be a good person? A good person, in the Bennett Dictionary, a good person was a person who gave until they were empty. I can't pay for the tires, I said. The silence at the table was instant. Even the kids seemed to sense the shift in atmospheric pressure. What? Sharon whispered. I can't pay for the tires, I repeated. I have a large insurance premium due this month. I do not have $600 to give you. It was a lie. I had the money. I could have bought 10 sets of tires. But for the first time, the word no formed a barricade in my throat that I refused to dismantle. Sharon's face turned red. You are lying. I know what you make. I saw your pay stub when you were applying for the mortgage. That was 3 years ago, I said. Expenses change. You are punishing your sister, Sharon hissed. You are punishing her because you are jealous of her family, because she has children and you have nothing. The cruelty of the statement took my breath away. It was a low blow. Designed to cripple me, Sharon knew that I had wanted children once, years ago, but had prioritized my career to survive. She knew it was a sore spot, and she pressed her thumb right into the bruise. That is enough, I said. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. Sit down, my father said. It was the first time he had spoken with authority all night. You are upsetting your mother. No, I said. I am leaving. If you walk out that door, Sharon shouted, standing up to match me. Don't you dare think about coming back until you apologize. You are cold. Harper, you are cold and ungrateful. Maybe I am, I said. Or maybe I am just tired. I grabbed my purse. I walked out of the kitchen, past the screaming television, past the pile of shoes at the door. I could hear Kara muttering something about rich bitch as I left. I walked out into the cool evening air. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely unlock my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the dark house. The windows were glowing with warm, yellow light. From the outside, it looked like a happy home. It looked like the kind of place where people loved each other. But inside, it was a parasitic colony. They fed on guilt. They fed on obligation. And they had decided that I was the host. I started the engine. I drove away without looking back. As I drove back to the city, the silence of the car felt different. Usually, it felt lonely. Tonight, it felt like armor. I realized something during that drive. They didn't just want my money. They wanted my submission. They wanted me to acknowledge that no matter how far I went, no matter how high I climbed, I was still just a servant to the family unit. $600, I said aloud to the empty highway. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was about the entitlement. When I got back to my apartment that night, I sat on my sofa and looked at the spare key on the counter, the one I had meant to ask for, but had forgotten in the heat of the argument. I had thought, briefly, about calling Mom to apologize. I had almost convinced myself that I was the one in the wrong. But then 2 days passed. Silence. No apology from them. No check-in. And then came the text. Tuesday night, 11 o'clock. Your apartment is closer to the airport. They hadn't just moved on from the argument. They had escalated. They had decided that since I wouldn't pay for the tires, I would pay with my home. They were going to punish me for my defiance by invading my sanctuary. They were going to force me to be the good sister by physical occupation. That Sunday dinner was the prelude. It was the warning shot that I had ignored. But standing in my apartment now, with the new locks installed and the rain beating against the glass, I knew the war had officially begun. I had walked out of their house on Sunday. Tonight, I had ensured they could not walk into mine. I took a deep breath. The memory of the dinner faded, replaced by the cold reality of the present. They were 10 minutes away. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. I stood by the intercom, waiting. I was not the daughter who passed the salt anymore. I was the woman who changed the locks, and God help me. I was ready for them. The vibration of the phone in my hand felt less like a notification and more like a seizure. It was 11:02 at night. The locksmith was on his way. But the digital assault was already well underway. I had not just received a text. I had received a declaration of war. But before the locksmith arrived, before the physical barricades were erected, I made the mistake of engaging. I called my mother. I dialed Sharon's number. My thumb hovering over the contact name that I had once associated with comfort, but which now only triggered a Pavlovian response of anxiety. I needed her to stop this. I needed her to be the parent. I needed her to call Kara and tell her to turn the car around. She answered on the first ring. "Harper," she said. Her voice was not sleepy. It was alert. It was the voice of a general commanding troops from a safe bunker. "Don't make this hard for your sister." I stood in the center of my darkened kitchen, the light from the refrigerator display casting a blue hue over the granite. "I am not making anything hard," I said, fighting to keep my voice from cracking. "Kara just texted me that she is coming here, tonight, with 4 children. I am working. Mom, I have a critical shift tomorrow." "She has nowhere else to go," Sharon cut in. The tone was dismissive, as if my job was a hobby that could be paused for a tea party. "Their lease is up. They need a landing pad for 2 weeks while Dylan sorts out the next move. It is just 2 weeks. Harper, you have that big apartment all to yourself. It is selfish to keep it empty." "It is not empty," I snapped. "I live here. My work is here." "Oh, stop it," Sharon sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation of air that crackled over the line. "The kids will be at school during the day. You won't even know they are there." I froze. "School? What school? They live 2 hours away in Bellingham. How are they going to go to school from downtown Seattle?" "Kara is going to enroll them in the district near you temporarily," Sharon said, as if this was a completely rational logistical feat to pull off overnight. "Or she will homeschool them. I don't know the details." "Harper, why do you always have to pick everything apart? Why can't you just say yes?" "Because this is insane," I said. "You are talking about 4 children under the age of 10 in a 1-bedroom apartment that is not child-proofed. I have glass tables. I have exposed outlets. I have sensitive files. And I work nights. I sleep during the day. If they are here, I cannot sleep. If I cannot sleep, I cannot work. If I cannot work, I lose my job. And if I lose my job, I cannot pay for this apartment that you are so eager to give away." "You are being dramatic," Sharon said. Her voice dropped an octave, shifting from command to disappointment. "Money has really changed you. Harper, you used to be so sweet. You used to be the girl who would do anything for her family. Now you act like you are better than us just because you have a view of the water." The accusation hit me in the chest. Money changed you. It was their favorite weapon. Anytime I asserted a boundary, It was blamed on my bank account, as if poverty was the only state in which virtue could exist. Money did not change me, I said, my grip on the phone tightening until my knuckles turned white. And I was never sweet. Mom, I was compliant. I was scared. I was scared that if I didn't do what you wanted, you would stop loving me. I am not scared anymore. You sound like a stranger, she whispered. My Harper would never turn her sister away in the middle of the night. Your Harper is gone, I said. She burned out trying to keep you all warm. While I was speaking, my phone began to pulse against my ear, a series of rapid-fire vibrations. I pulled the phone away for a second to look at the screen. It was Kara. Tickets are non-refundable. The first text read, "We gave up the lease on the old place. We have to be out by midnight. There is no backup plan. Harper, do not do this. We are on I-5 South. We will be there soon. No backup plan." The phrase chilled me. They had burned their bridges on purpose. They had engineered a crisis so severe that I would have no choice but to save them. It was a hostage situation, and the hostages were my nieces and nephews. I put the phone back to my ear. "Mom," I said, my voice cold and steady. "Kara just texted me. She says there is no backup plan. Did you know about this? Did you know they were giving up their lease without having a confirmed place to stay?" "They had a confirmed place," Sharon said innocently. "They had you." "I never agreed to this," I shouted. The sound echoed off the bare walls of my living room. "I was never asked. I was informed 5 minutes ago." "Well, you are the safety net," Sharon said. "That is your role. You are the strong one. Now, listen to me. Give Kara the code to the lobby. Let them up. We can discuss the details in the morning. Do not leave those babies on the street." "I am not leaving them on the street," I said. "But they are not coming into my apartment. If they show up here and refuse to leave, I will not call you. I will not call Dylan." "What are you going to do?" Sharon challenged. "I will call the police," I said. There was a silence on the other end of the line, a profound, stunned silence. "You wouldn't?" she breathed. "I will," I said. "If Kara abandons 4 children in the lobby of a secure building with no supervision and no place to go, that is child endangerment. That is abandonment. I will call Child Protective Services, and I will have them taken into emergency custody for their own safety, because unlike you, I actually care about their safety. Sleeping on the floor of a stranger's apartment is not safe." "You are a monster," Sharon hissed. "No," I said. "I am a mandatory reporter, and I am someone who is done being manipulated." "If you do that, I will never forgive you," Sharon said. "I will tell everyone. I will tell the whole family what you did." "You do that," I said. "But tell them the whole story. Tell them you sent 4 kids to a home that turned them away, and you did it without asking." I hung up. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I felt nauseous. I had just threatened my own mother with the police. I had just crossed a line that I had been towing for decades. But the nausea was mixed with something else. Adrenaline, survival instinct. I didn't have time to process the emotional fallout. I had to secure the perimeter. I dialed the front desk again. "David," I said when the concierge picked up. "It is Harper James again." "Yes, Ms. James. The locksmith is 5 minutes out." "Good," I said. "I need to make an addition to my previous request regarding the guest list." "Go ahead." "I need you to open my file," I said. "I need you to find the entry for Sharon Bennett. She was listed as an emergency contact and a permanent key holder." "I have the file open," David said. "I see her name here." "Delete it," I commanded. "Remove her immediately. She is not authorized to access my unit. She is not authorized to authorize guests. If she calls, if she shows up, she is to be treated as a stranger. Is that understood?" "Understood, Ms. James," David said. His voice was professional, but I could hear the curiosity in it. It wasn't every day that a tenant scrubbed their mother from the access logs at 11 at night. "I have removed her. The system is updated. The only person authorized to access Unit 33B is you." "Thank you," I said. "And David? If a woman named Kara Bennett arrives with children, do not let them up. Tell them I am not accepting visitors. If they refuse to leave the lobby, call the authorities. Do not call me." "Understood." I lowered the phone. It was done. I had severed the digital limb. I walked over to the window. The city below was oblivious to the civil war happening in my apartment. The rain was still falling. Somewhere out there, in the darkness of Interstate 5, my sister was driving a minivan filled with everything she owned, heading toward a door that was about to slam shut in her face. I felt a pang of guilt, sharp and familiar, about the kids. It wasn't their fault. They were pawns in a game their parents were playing. But I knew that if I let them in for one night, they would never leave. If I let them in, I would become the third parent. I would become the financier of their chaos. And I would lose the only thing I had managed to build for myself, my peace. I sat down on the sofa. My hands were still shaking. I needed to do something with this nervous energy. I couldn't sleep. Not yet. I picked up my phone again. I didn't look at Kara's texts. Instead, I opened my banking app. I had never really looked at the history in detail. I checked my balance. I paid my bills. But I had never done a forensic accounting of my generosity. I had always been afraid to look. I had been afraid that seeing the number would make me feel like a fool. But now, I wanted to know. I needed to know. I scrolled back. Transfer to Kara Bennett, $200. October 4th. Transfer to Dylan Bennett, $150. September 20th. Payment to Ridley's Auto Repair, Mom's Car, $480. August 15th. Transfer to Kara Bennett, $300. August 1st. It went on, page after page, small amounts, medium amounts, occasional large amounts for emergencies. I went to the menu and selected Download Statements. I chose the range, last 5 years. I watched the little loading circle spin. This wasn't just about tonight. This wasn't just about the apartment. This was about a systemic extraction of wealth. They had been bleeding me dry. $50 at a time, for half a decade. And when I finally said no to a $600 set of tires, they decided to take the whole apartment. The file downloaded. I opened it. I wasn't just saving money anymore. I was building a case. I didn't know who I would need to show this to, maybe a lawyer, maybe a judge, maybe just myself when the guilt threatened to drown me. But I was going to have it. I took a screenshot of Kara's text. No backup plan. I saved it to a new folder on my phone. I named the folder Evidence. The locksmith knocked on the door. I stood up, took a deep breath, and walked to the entryway. I was ready to lock them out, but more importantly, I was ready to lock myself in. The bank app was still open in my hand, the numbers glowing in the dark, a testament to exactly how much sweetness had cost me. "Coming," I said. And for the first time that night, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a witness, and witnesses take notes. The morning sun was trying to push through the heavy gray clouds that hung over Seattle, but inside the lobby of my building, the atmosphere was already stormy. I had stepped out at 6 a.m, unable to sleep, to grab a coffee and walk off the adrenaline that had been coursing through my veins since the night before. I had hoped, perhaps naively, that the silence from my phone meant they had turned around. I had hoped that common sense had prevailed. But as I approached the glass revolving doors of the Stratoline Tower at 8 a.m, clutching a lukewarm cup of black coffee, I realized that hope was a poor strategy. Through the glass, I could see the chaos before I even heard it. The lobby of my building was designed to be a sanctuary of minimalism. It featured polished marble floors, abstract art that cost more than my car, and a hushed, library-like atmosphere. But now, it looked like a refugee camp. There were 6 suitcases piled in the center of the walkway, not carry-on bags, massive, hard-shell rolling trunks that suggested a permanent relocation. Surrounding this fortress of luggage were my 4 nieces and nephews. The youngest was currently smearing something sticky on the pristine glass of the concierge desk, while the 2 middle ones were chasing each other around a decorative potted fig tree. And then there were the adults. Kara was leaning over the high marble counter, her finger jabbed in the face of the morning concierge, a young woman named Sarah who looked like she was about to cry. Dylan was sitting on one of the suitcases, scrolling on his phone, completely oblivious to the fact that his children were dismantling the lobby decor. And Sharon. My mother was standing in the middle of the room with her arms crossed, staring up at the vaulted ceiling and shaking her head, performing a silent pantomime of victimization for anyone who walked by. I took a deep breath. The air in my lungs felt cold. This was it. The private war had gone public. I pushed through the revolving door. The sound hit me first. Kara's voice was shrill, echoing off the stone surfaces. "I am telling you, she is my sister," Kara was screaming. "She lives in 33B. Just give me the spare key. She knows we are coming." "Ma'am, I cannot do that," Sarah was saying, her voice trembling. "Ms. James has left strict instructions. No keys are to be released." "This is ridiculous," Sharon chimed in, projecting her voice so that the two businessmen waiting for the elevator could hear. "We are her family. We have driven 2 hours. Do you treat all your guests like criminals?" I walked forward. My heels clicked rhythmically on the marble. Click, click, click. The sound cut through the noise. Dylan looked up first, then Sharon, then Kara turned around. For a second, the entire lobby went silent. The kids stopped running. Sarah slumped in relief behind the desk. Kara looked terrible. Her hair was messy. Her eyes were rimmed with red, and her clothes looked slept in. But the moment she saw me, her exhaustion was replaced by a flash of pure, hot rage. "You!" she shrieked. She abandoned the desk and marched toward me. "Tell your guard dog to let us up right now. Harper." "The kids are exhausted. We have been sitting in this lobby for an hour." I stopped 5 feet away from her. I did not raise my voice. I kept my posture rigid, my face blank. I channeled every ounce of authority I used when rerouting flights during a blizzard. "I told you last night," I said. "I told you not to come. I told you I was working. I told you no." "We are here," Kara yelled, throwing her hands up. "What do you want us to do?" "Turn around. We have nowhere to go." "That is a choice you made," I said. "You chose to drive here after I told you the answer was no. You chose to pack 6 suitcases and drag 4 children out of their beds without a confirmed place to stay. That is on you. Kara, not me." Sharon stepped forward, flanking Kara. She was wearing her best, disappointed mother face, the one that usually made me crumble. "Harper," she said, her tone dripping with artificial sweetness that barely covered the venom underneath. "Look at you, standing there in your expensive coat, blocking your own flesh and blood from getting some rest. Do you want the whole building to know how cold you are? Do you want your neighbors to see you treating your mother like a stray dog?" I looked around. The businessmen were watching. A woman walking her poodle had stopped to stare. Sarah was watching from the desk. Sharon was betting on my shame. She was betting that I would be so embarrassed by the scene that I would fold just to make it stop. She thought the fear of public judgment was stronger than my resolve. She was wrong. "I do not care what the neighbors think," I said clearly, "because the neighbors do not pay my mortgage, and neither do you. How dare you bring up money?" Sharon gasped, clutching her chest. "Is that all you care about? We are talking about family. We are talking about love. We are talking about usage," I corrected. "You do not want family. Mom, you want a facility. You want a free hotel. We just need a place for a few weeks," Kara shouted. "Why are you being such a bitch? You have a whole apartment that is empty all day. You are just being spiteful because you are jealous that I have a life and you have nothing but a job." "I have a job," I agreed. "A job that pays for the roof you are demanding to sleep under." I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I unlocked it and opened the banking app. I had prepared for this. "You say I am cold," I said, my voice rising just enough to carry across the lobby. "You say I do not help. Let us look at the record." I held the phone up. Though they couldn't see the screen from where they stood, I began to read. October 4th, I read, "Transfer to Kara Bennett, $200, reason groceries." "Stop it," Kara hissed. September 20th, I continued, ignoring her. Transfer to Dylan Bennett, $150, reason car insurance. Harper, stop, Sharon warned, her eyes darting to the bystanders. August 15th, I read, louder now. Payment to Ridley's Auto Repair, $480, mom's transmission. I said stop. Kara lunged for the phone, but I took a step back. July 1st, I said. Rent assistance, $1,200. I lowered the phone and looked at them. The lobby was dead silent. The businessmen were no longer looking at me with judgment. They were looking at my family with pity. I have the receipts for 5 years, I said. Thousands of dollars, thousands of hours of my labor, transferred directly into your pockets, and the one time I say no, you ambush me in my own home and call me selfish. Kara was shaking. She looked like she wanted to hit me. Dylan had finally stood up from the suitcase, looking uncomfortable. It is not about the past, Harper, Dylan mumbled. We are in a bind. We just need a break. You do not need a break, I said. You need a plan, and I am not a plan. At that moment, the youngest child, a 3-year-old boy named Leo, decided he was bored. He ran full speed into the pile of suitcases. He hit the largest one, a battered blue hardshell that was overstuffed and zippered shut with visible strain. The impact knocked the suitcase over. It hit the marble floor with a heavy, dull thud. Wham! The zipper, unable to handle the sudden pressure, burst open. Clothes spilled out onto the elegant lobby floor, t-shirts, dirty laundry, toys. It was a mess, but on top of the pile of clothes, sliding out like a devastating secret, was a stack of envelopes. They were banded together with a rubber band. I looked down. Kara scrambled to dive for them, but she was too far away. The envelope on top was bright red. The bold, black letters stamped across the front were legible even from where I stood. Eviction notice. Final warning. And underneath that, another envelope with the logo of a collection agency. I stared at it. The world seemed to slow down. 2 weeks, I whispered. I looked up at Kara. She was on her knees, clutching the envelopes to her chest, her face pale. You said you were dropping them off for 2 weeks, I said. You said the lease was up. You didn't say you were evicted. Sharon looked away. Dylan looked at his shoes. It is the same thing, Kara cried, scrambling to her feet. We lost the house. Okay, are you happy? We lost the house because Dylan's investment didn't pay out in time. We have nowhere to go. Harper nowhere. That is why we brought everything. We were going to stay until we got back on our feet. Until you got back on your feet, I repeated. That could take months, years. So what? Sharon snapped, stepping in to defend her golden child. She is your sister if she needs to live with you for a year. She lives with you for a year. That is what family does. No, I said. That is what a parasite does. The word hung in the air. Harsh, accurate, irrevocable. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment, I said. It is illegal to have 7 people living in an 800-square-foot unit. The building would evict me, and then we would all be homeless. Did you think about that? Did you think about anything other than your own immediate comfort? We would figure it out, Kara screamed. We always figure it out. No, I said. I figure it out. I pay. You just exist. I turned to Sarah at the concierge desk. She was wide-eyed, clutching her radio. Sarah, I said. My voice was calm now, deadly calm. These people are not my guests. I did not invite them. I do not authorize them to be on the premises. Harper, don't you dare, Sharon growled. Please ask them to remove their belongings and leave the building, I continued, keeping my eyes on Sarah. If they refuse, please call the police and have them trespassed. You are bluffing, Dylan said, stepping forward aggressively. You aren't going to call the cops on your own family. I turned to look at him. Dylan, look at the floor. Look at the eviction notice in your wife's hand. I know you lied to me. I know you plan to squat in my home. I am not bluffing. I am protecting myself. I looked at Kara. She was crying now. Ugly. Heaving sobs. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of a manipulator who had lost control of the narrative. "I hate you," she screamed. "I hope you die alone in this stupid building. I hope you rot." "I might be alone," I said, "but I will be safe, and I will be solvent." I turned back to Sarah. "I am going to work now. Please handle this." "Yes, Ms. James," Sarah said. She picked up the phone. "Security to the lobby, please." I walked past them. I walked past the pile of dirty laundry on the marble floor. I walked past my mother, who was now sputtering indignantly to no one in particular. I walked past the children, who looked confused and scared. I felt a pang of heartbreak for the kids. I did. I wanted to hug them. I wanted to buy them breakfast. But I knew that if I gave them an inch, the adults attached to them would take a mile. I could not save the children by drowning myself. I walked to the elevator bank and pressed the button. "Harper," Sharon yelled after me. "If you get in that elevator, you are dead to me. Do you hear me? Dead?" The elevator doors opened with a smooth, cheerful ding. I stepped inside. I turned around to face the lobby. I saw the security guards arriving. 2 large men in blazers moving toward the pile of suitcases. I saw Dylan trying to zip the broken bag. I saw Kara weeping. I looked my mother in the eye as the doors began to slide shut. "Goodbye, Mom," I said. The doors closed. The chaos was cut off instantly, replaced by the gentle hum of the lift mechanism. I was alone in the elevator. My hands were shaking so hard, I had to lean against the wall to keep from sliding down. I gasped for air, my chest heaving. It felt like I had just run a marathon. I looked at my reflection in the polished steel of the elevator doors. I looked pale. I looked terrified. But I also looked like someone who still owned her own life. I pulled my phone out again. I opened the evidence folder. I added a new note. Date today. Event attempted. Forced entry occupation. Result denied. The elevator climbed higher and higher, taking me away from the lobby, away from the guilt, and toward the only thing that had never betrayed me, my empty, silent, paid-for apartment. The elevator doors slid open on the 33rd floor, depositing me into the hushed, sterile hallway that led to my unit. The silence was jarring. 5 minutes ago, I had been in the center of a hurricane, surrounded by screaming children and the vitriol of my own mother. Now, the only sound was the soft hum of the building's ventilation system. I unlocked my door, my newly secured door, and stepped inside. I locked it behind me, engaging the deadbolt with a satisfying, heavy click. I leaned against the wood for a moment, closing my eyes, waiting for the crash. I expected to cry. I expected to slide down to the floor and sob into my hands like they do in the movies. But the tears did not come. Instead, I felt a strange, vibrating numbness. It was the same feeling I got during a code red at work, when a blizzard grounded 500 flights and I had to reroute thousands of passengers. It was a state of hyper-focus where emotions were liabilities and data was king. I walked to the kitchen and placed my phone on the counter. It was already lighting up. The physical siege was over. The digital siege had just begun. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands steady, and unlocked the screen. The notifications were stacking up like incoming flight paths on a radar screen. But before I opened the angry texts from my cousins or the missed calls from numbers I did not recognize, I opened Instagram. I needed to see the narrative they were building. In my line of work, you do not react to the weather. You analyze the forecast. Kara had posted 3 minutes ago. I stared at the image. It was a photo of a Starbucks cup held against the backdrop of the SeaTac Airport departure terminal. It was not taken in my lobby. It must have been an old photo, or perhaps they had driven to the airport just to stage it. The lighting was bright. The filter was warm. The caption read, "Life throws curveballs, but we swing for the fences, taking the kiddos on a spontaneous adventure. Sometimes you just have to trust the universe and let go of toxic energy." Family, first adventure deserved blessed. I let out a short, dry laugh. Deserved. 10 minutes ago. She was screaming that she was homeless. She was holding an eviction notice. She was weeping in front of strangers. But on the internet, she was a free spirit embarking on a spontaneous journey, unshackled by the toxic energy that was, presumably, me. She was curating a reality where she was the hero of a whimsical travel blog, rather than a woman who had just attempted a home invasion. I switched apps to Facebook. I knew my mother's modus operandi. Kara was the influencer. Sharon was the martyr. There it was. Posted 5 minutes ago. It was a text post against a background of floating clouds. It breaks a mother's heart to realize that she raised a child who values a bank balance more than human life. I spent my life sacrificing for my girls. I gave everything. To be treated with such coldness in my old age, to watch my grandchildren be turned away, it is a pain I would not wish on my worst enemy. Please pray for our family. We are going through a dark time. But God provides, even when family does not. Beneath the post, the comments were already rolling in. Oh my God. Sharon, what happened? Praying for you. Some people just forget where they came from. Is this about Harper? I always knew she was stuck up. I felt a flash of heat rise up my neck. The urge to type was physical. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to comment. I wanted to scream. I didn't turn them away because I'm cold. They tried to move 7 people into a 1-bedroom apartment. They are evicted. They lied to me. I wanted to post the photo of the eviction notice. I wanted to post the bank statements showing the thousands of dollars I had transferred to them over the years. I wanted to burn their narrative to the ground with the flamethrower of truth. But I stopped. I remembered my training at Stratline, when a pilot is shouting over the radio that they are low on fuel and the weather is closing in. You do not shout back. You do not argue about whose fault it is that they didn't fuel up in Anchorage. You clear the frequency. You stick to the facts. You remain the calmest voice in the room. If I engaged now, if I commented, I would look defensive. I would look guilty. I would be dragging myself down into the mud with them. And they had a lifetime of experience fighting in the mud. I would lose. I put the phone down. Do not engage, I said aloud to the empty room. Do not engage. The phone buzzed again, and again, and again. It was the flying monkeys. The extended family members who had been deputized by Sharon's post to enforce the social contract. A text from my cousin Jessica. I just saw your mom's post. Harper, are you serious? You wouldn't let them stay for a few nights. They have kids. A message from Aunt Sheila. I know you are busy with your big career, but family is family. You are going to regret this when you are old and alone. A DM from a second cousin I hadn't spoken to in 10 years. Wow. Just wow. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know about the final notice. They didn't know about the demand for keys. They only knew the story Sharon was telling. A story where I was the wicked witch in the ivory tower and they were the innocent peasants. I took a deep breath and made a decision. I would not reply. I would not defend myself. Silence is a vacuum, and if you let it sit long enough, people eventually start to fill it with their own doubts. But silence is not inaction. I sat down at my computer. I opened a new folder. I named it Timeline of Events. I began to screenshot everything. I took pictures of Kara's Instagram post with the timestamp. I took pictures of Sharon's Facebook post and the comments. I took screenshots of every nasty text message from the relatives, capturing the times and the names. I wasn't just reading them, I was cataloging them. I was turning their emotional abuse into data points. 11:45 in the morning. My phone rang. It was my Aunt Maggie. I hesitated. Aunt Maggie was my father's sister. She was the black sheep of his side of the family because she had divorced her husband 20 years ago and started a successful catering business. She was practical. She was the only one who didn't worship at the altar of Sharon's martyrdom. I picked up. Harper. Her voice was brisk, cutting through the static. Hi, Aunt Maggie, I said, my voice sounding weary even to myself. If you are calling to tell me I'm a terrible person, please just send a text. I am compiling them. I am not calling to tell you that, she said. I am calling because your mother is an idiot. I blinked. Excuse me. I just got off the phone with Ray, Maggie said. He is breathless. He sounds like he's having a panic attack. Apparently, Sharon is on a rampage. I noticed, I said. Facebook is very lively this morning. Listen to me. Maggie lowered her voice. I wanted you to know something. Ray let it slip where they are. I assumed they were at a hotel, I said. Or maybe they really did go to the airport. No, Maggie said. They are at your parents' house. In Bellingham. I froze. What? They are at the house, Maggie repeated. They drove back. They are all there. Kara, Dylan, the kids. They are unpacking the suitcases in the living room as we speak. My brain screeched to a halt. But Kara said they had no backup plan. She said they had nowhere to go. Sharon told me that if I didn't take them, they would be on the street. Bullshit, Maggie said, using a word my mother would have fainted at. Your parents have a 4-bedroom house. Harper, the guest room is empty. The basement is finished. They have plenty of room. It is crowded. Sure, but they were never going to be homeless. I felt the blood drain from my face. So it was a lie, I whispered. The whole no backup plan thing, it was a lie. It was a squeeze, Maggie corrected. Sharon didn't want them there. She didn't want the noise. She didn't want the mess. She wanted to dump them on you so she could keep her peace and quiet. She wanted to look like the hero for finding them a solution without actually having to do the work. And Kara wanted your apartment. She wanted the city life. She wanted the view. I sat back in my chair. The revelation hit me harder than the eviction notice had. They weren't desperate. They were convenient. They had driven 2 hours, staged a scene in a lobby, and threatened to call the police on me, not because they had no other option, but because they preferred my option. They preferred to displace me rather than inconvenience themselves. Thank you, Maggie, I said. I needed to know that. You did the right thing, Maggie said firmly. Don't let them gaslight you. If they really had nowhere to go, Ray wouldn't be complaining about Dylan eating all his chips right now. They are fine. They are just mad that you cut the strings. I hung up the phone. The guilt, the heavy, suffocating blanket of guilt that Sharon had wrapped around me for 30 years, began to lift. It was replaced by a cold, sharp anger. They had played me, or rather, they had tried to play me. My phone buzzed again. A text from Sharon. I looked at it. I hope you are happy. We are all crammed into the house. The kids are crying because they are confused. You have so much space. Harper, does it feel good? Does your empty apartment keep you warm at night? It was a precision strike. She knew my deepest insecurity. She knew I worried about ending up alone. She knew I sometimes looked at my perfect, quiet life and wondered if I had traded love for stability. Does your empty apartment keep you warm? I looked around my living room. The rain was lashing against the windows, but inside, it was 72 degrees. My sofa was soft. My kitchen was clean. My bills were paid. And most importantly, the air was peaceful. I typed a reply, yes. Then I deleted it. She didn't deserve an answer. An answer was fuel. An answer proved that her words still had the power to hurt me. I went into my settings. I found the Do Not Disturb function. I set it to until I turn it off. Then I went a step further. I went to my contact list. I selected Sharon Bennett. I selected Kara Bennett, and I assigned them a silent ringtone. I did not block them, not yet. I needed the texts for my evidence folder. I needed them to keep digging their own grave. But I muted them. I stood up and walked to the bedroom. It was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I had been awake for 20 hours. I pulled the blackout curtains shut, plunging the room into darkness. I stripped off my work clothes, the armor of the operations lead, and put on my pajamas. I climbed into my bed. The sheets were cool and crisp. There were no sticky fingers grabbing at me. There was no screaming cartoon on a television. There was no mother telling me I wasn't enough. I lay there in the dark, listening to the silence. For years, I had thought silence was the sound of loneliness. I thought it was the sound of missing out. But as my eyes closed and my breathing slowed, I realized I had been wrong. Silence wasn't loneliness. Silence was ownership. This was my bed. This was my air. This was my life. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I drifted off to sleep without a single ounce of guilt weighing down my chest. I woke up to the sound of rain drumming against the glass, but the peacefulness I had felt falling asleep was gone. In its place was a nagging, intellectual itch. It was the same sensation I got at work when a flight plan looked technically correct, but felt wrong, a discrepancy in fuel load or a timing error that the computer hadn't flagged. But my gut had. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene in the lobby, the screaming, the suitcases, the sheer volume of luggage, and then the image that refused to leave my mind, the red envelope. Final notice. Kara had claimed they were just visiting for 2 weeks. She had claimed the eviction was a sudden tragedy, but you do not receive a final notice overnight. That takes months. It takes missed payments, warnings, and legal proceedings. If they had been hiding an eviction for months, what else were they hiding? People do not pack 6 hard-shell suitcases for a 2-week vacation. They pack that much when they are moving. I threw off the covers. The numbness was replaced by a cold, sharp suspicion. I needed to stop thinking like a sister and start thinking like an investigator. I walked into the living room. My apartment was quiet, but it suddenly felt crowded with invisible threats. I went to the kitchen island where I kept my mail. Usually, I was meticulous. Bills in one pile, personal correspondence in another, junk mail in the recycling. I picked up the stack. It looked normal, but as I rifled through it, I noticed something odd about my bank statement from last month. The envelope was slightly torn at the corner, not in the way a machine tears it, but in the way a finger pries it open. I looked at the flap. The adhesive was bumpy, as if it had been sealed, opened, and then pressed back down. My heart began to hammer a slow, heavy rhythm. I checked the other envelopes. A credit card offer was missing its interior contents. A utility bill for the electric company was wrinkled, as if someone had smoothed it out after crumpling it. I had given my mother a key 3 years ago. I had assumed she never used it. But looking at this mail, a terrifying thought took root. Had she been coming here? Had she been reading my financial life while I was at work? I grabbed my keys and took the elevator down to the lobby. I needed to talk to the building manager, not the concierge. I needed the logs. Mr. Henderson's office was behind the front desk. He was a stern man who liked me because I never complained and always paid my HOA fees on time. "Ms. James," he said, looking up from his computer. "I heard about the disturbance this morning. I apologize that security had to get involved." "It is handled," I said, waving his apology away. "But I need to ask you something. I need to see the access logs for my unit. Not just from last night. I want to see the logs for the last 6 months. Mr. Henderson frowned. "Is there a problem?" "I suspect there has been unauthorized entry," I said. He nodded gravely and typed on his keyboard. The silence in the office was thick. I watched his eyes scan the screen. "Well," he said, "I see your fob usage, obviously, consistent with your work schedule, but I also see several entries using the spare key code, the physical key override." "When?" I asked. "Let me see," he said. "October 12th at 2 in the afternoon, November 3rd at 11 in the morning, December 1st, that was last week, December 1st at 10 in the morning." I felt the blood drain from my face. I was at work during all those times. "We have a note here on the December entry," Mr. Henderson said, squinting at the screen. "The doorman logged it. Mother of tenant. Stated she was dropping off groceries and picking up mail. Picking up mail." "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice steady but cold as ice. "I did not ask her to pick up my mail. I did not ask her to drop off groceries." "I see," he said. He looked uncomfortable. "Since she was on the approved list and had a key." "I know," I said. "It is not your fault, but I need a printout of those dates." I left the office with a piece of paper that felt like a smoking gun. They had been in my house, multiple times, while I was sitting at my desk at Strataline, managing global logistics. My mother and sister had been in my sanctuary, going through my life. Why? Why sneak in if they wanted money? They just asked. If they wanted to snoop, they could do it when they visited. Why the secrecy? I went back up to my apartment. The suspicion was evolving into a theory, and the theory was ugly. I sat down at my computer. I had secured the physical doors. Now I needed to check the digital ones. I went to the website of the 3 major credit bureaus. I had not checked my credit report in a year. I had excellent credit. I never had a reason to worry. I initiated a credit freeze. It was a standard safety measure I should have done years ago. As I clicked through the prompts, a warning box popped up. Recent activity alert. New inquiry. I clicked on the details. Inquiry date, December 2nd. Creditor Seattle City Light. Type new service application. I stared at the screen. Seattle City Light was the electric company. I already had an account with them. I had an account with them for 3 years. I called the customer service number immediately. "This is Harper James," I told the representative. "I am seeing an inquiry on my credit report for a new service application, but I already have service." "One moment. Ms. James," the operator said. "Let me pull up your file." "Ah, I see. We have your primary account for Unit 33B, but it looks like we received a request to transfer the service into a new name last week." "What name?" I asked. "Kara Bennett," the operator said. The request was to add her as a primary account holder authorized to make changes and billing decisions. "On my apartment," I asked. "How is that possible? She does not own this unit." "They provided a lease agreement," the operator said. "A sublease agreement." The room spun. "A sublease agreement." "I never signed a sublease," I said. "I am the owner. I did not authorize this." "Okay," the operator said, her voice shifting to a more serious tone. "They also provided a social security number for verification. It matched the one we have on file for you as the guarantor." "They used my social security number?" "Yes, ma'am, to co-sign the transfer." I hung up the phone. I didn't wait for the resolution. I knew enough. They weren't just looking for a place to crash. They were establishing residency. In Washington state, tenant rights are very strong. If someone can prove they live at an address, if they receive mail there, if their name is on the utility bill, if they have a key, it is incredibly difficult to remove them. You cannot just kick them out. You have to go through a formal eviction process that can take months. They knew this. Or rather, Dylan knew this. He was a grifter. He knew the loopholes. The plan wasn't a 2-week vacation. The plan was a hostile takeover. They intended to get into the apartment, get their names on the bills using the data they stole from my mail, and then refuse to leave. They would have forced me into a legal stalemate where I would be stuck living with them and paying for them indefinitely because I couldn't legally throw them out of their residence. "No backup plan," Kara had said. That was the truest thing she had said. I was the plan. My home was the plan. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to close my eyes. This wasn't just family dysfunction. This was fraud. This was identity theft. This was a calculated criminal conspiracy by my own mother and sister to steal my home from under me. I picked up my phone. I unmuted Sharon. I didn't care about the strategy of silence anymore. I needed to hear her deny it. I called her. She picked up on the second ring. "Are you finally calling to apologize?" she asked. Her voice was smug. She thought I was breaking. "Did you give Kara my social security number?" I asked. "What?" Sharon sounded genuinely confused. Or maybe she was just a better actress than I gave her credit for. "What are you talking about?" "Did you give her my social security number? Did you give her access to my mail? Did you help her forge a sublease agreement?" "You are talking crazy," Sharon said. "You are sounding paranoid." "Harper, have you been sleeping? You sound manic." "Don't gaslight me." "Mom," I said. "I just spoke to the electric company. Someone tried to put Kara's name on my utility bill last week. They used my personal information that only you have." "Oh, for heaven's sake," Sharon scoffed. "Kara was just trying to help. She wanted to contribute to the bills while she stayed there. She was trying to be responsible, and you are twisting it into some kind of crime." "She doesn't live here," I shouted. "She has never lived here. You cannot put your name on a utility bill for a house you do not live in unless you are trying to establish tenancy. You are hysterical, Sharon said. It is just paperwork. Why do you always have to make everything so legal? We are family. What is yours is hers. That is how it works. That is not how the law works, I said. And that is not how I work. You stole my identity. You broke into my house. I did not break in, Sharon yelled. I used the key you gave me. You gave it to me. You are the one who is unstable. Harper, imagining plots against you. You should see a therapist. She hung up on me. I stared at the phone. She had denied it. She had called me crazy. She had justified identity fraud as trying to contribute. I sat there, trembling with rage. But then, a thought occurred to me. If they had been planning this for weeks, if they had been coming into the apartment to prep for their arrival, there had to be more evidence than just a utility inquiry. I opened the family group chat on WhatsApp. I had muted it months ago, but I never left it. It was a stream of baby photos, political memes from my uncle, and passive-aggressive updates from Sharon. I scrolled back, past the angry messages from today, past the photos of the eviction drama. I scrolled back to last week, December 1st, the date Mr. Henderson said my mother had entered the building. There were a dozen photos uploaded that day, mostly of the kids at a park, but then one photo caught my eye. It was a picture of Kara's youngest, Leo, holding a toy airplane. Caption: Leo is ready for his auntie's big city life. I clicked on the photo to enlarge it. Leo was smiling. He was holding the plane up, but it wasn't the kid I was looking at. It was the background. Behind Leo was a white wall, and on that wall was a piece of art, a framed print of a vintage propeller that hung in my hallway, and on the floor, visible just over Leo's shoulder, was a rug. My rug. The geometric pattern was unmistakable. But that wasn't the worst part. In the corner of the photo, resting on my hallway console table, was a measuring tape, and next to the measuring tape was a notebook. I zoomed in on the notebook. The resolution was grainy, but I could make out the handwriting. It was Kara's bubbly script. The page was open. I could read the header, boys' room layout. I dropped the phone on the desk. They hadn't just visited, they had measured. They had walked through my apartment, my sanctuary, and planned where they were going to put their children. They had looked at my home office and renamed it boys' room. They had mentally evicted me before they even arrived. I stood up. I walked into the hallway. I looked at the spot where Leo had stood. I looked at the console table where the measuring tape had been. I felt violated in a way that went deeper than money. They had looked at my life, my carefully constructed, hard-won life, and decided it was simply empty space for them to fill. They didn't see me as a person occupying that space. They saw me as a placeholder, a squatter in their future home. I looked at the front door. The new silver lock was shining in the dim light. I walked over to it and touched the cold metal. If I hadn't changed that lock, if I had let them in last night, they would be here right now. The boys' room would be a reality. My files would be in the trash. My name would be getting scrubbed from the bills. And when I tried to kick them out, they would have produced the sublease, the utility bill, and the mail, and the police would have told me it was a civil matter. I would have been a guest in my own house. I leaned my forehead against the door. The anger that had been burning hot suddenly crystallized into something solid and unbreakable. This wasn't about babysitting. It wasn't about helping a sister in need. It wasn't about family drama. This was a heist, and they had almost pulled it off. I turned around and looked at my apartment. It looked different to me now. It wasn't just a place to sleep. It was a fortress, and I was the commander. I walked back to my computer. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I opened a new tab. I searched for how to report familial identity theft in Washington state. Then I searched for how to file a restraining order. I wasn't going to just defend myself anymore. I was going to counterattack. I picked up the evidence folder on my desktop. I dragged the screenshot of the utility inquiry into it. I dragged the photo of Leo in my hallway into it. I dragged the transcript of the chat with the building manager into it. "You want to play legal games?" I whispered to the screen. "Okay, Let's play. My mother had called me paranoid. She had called me hoarse. She had called me a bad daughter. But she had made one fatal mistake. She forgot that I was an operations lead. I didn't just solve problems, I eliminated risks. And for the first time in 33 years, I saw my family for what they truly were, a risk that could no longer be managed. It had to be neutralized. The week following the lobby incident was not filled with screaming matches or dramatic confrontations. It was filled with silence, but it was not the passive silence of a victim hiding in the dark. It was the active, humming silence of a machine rebuilding itself. I did not go back to my parents' house. I did not answer the barrage of guilt-laden texts that continued to trickle in from aunts and cousins I had not spoken to in a decade. Instead, I sat at my dining table, which I had converted into a command center, and I began the process of extricating my soul from the Bennett family ledger. It started with a woman named Dr. Eris on a Zoom screen. I had booked the emergency therapy session 3 days after the attempted invasion. I spent the first 20 minutes just listing facts: the money I had sent, the eviction notice, the measuring tape in the hallway, the accusation that I was cold. Dr. Eris listened, her face neutral. When I finished, she did not call me a victim. She did not tell me to forgive them. She gave me vocabulary. "Harper," she said, adjusting her glasses, "are you familiar with the term parentification?" I shook my head. It is when a child is forced to take on the role of an adult, emotionally or financially, for their parents or siblings. You were not raised to be a daughter. You were raised to be a utility. And what you are experiencing now is not just family drama. It is financial coercion. It is a systematic violation of boundaries designed to keep you in that utility role. The words hit me like a physical weight being lifted off my shoulders. Financial coercion. It wasn't that I was stingy. It wasn't that I was ungrateful. It was that I had been groomed to believe that my financial stability was a communal asset. "So, how do I stop it?" I asked. "You do not explain it to them," she said. "You cannot explain boundaries to people who benefit from you having none. You just enforce them. You close the bank." I closed the laptop and opened my banking portal. For the last 4 years, I had a recurring automatic transfer set up. Every Friday, $100 went from my checking account to a sub-account I had named Kara Emergency Fund. It was money I kept liquid, just in case she needed diapers or medicine. It was a habit, like brushing my teeth. I stared at the setting. Active. I clicked cancel. A warning box popped up. "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring transfer?" "Yes," I said aloud. I clicked confirm. It was a small click, but it felt like cutting a wire on a bomb. I didn't stop there. I went through every single bill pay. I found an old auto pay for a streaming service that Dylan used. Canceled. I found a subscription box for kids' educational toys that I had signed up for 2 Christmases ago and forgot to cancel. Canceled. Then came the security. After discovering the inquiry from the electric company, I knew that my personal data was compromised. My mother knew my social security number. She knew my mother's maiden name, obviously. She knew the name of my first pet. She held the keys to every security question I had ever set up. I spent 6 hours that Wednesday overhauling my digital life. I went to the 3 major credit bureaus and placed a permanent freeze on my credit. No one could open a credit card, a loan, or a utility account in my name without a PIN that only I knew. Then I went to my email. I changed the password to a random string of 20 characters. I enabled 2-factor authentication on everything bank, email, retirement accounts, even my grocery delivery app. But I didn't set the authentication to go to my phone number, which they could theoretically spoof or access if they stole my phone. I bought a hardware security key, a little USB stick that had to be physically plugged into my computer to grant access. If they wanted to hack me now, they would have to physically rob me, and I had already made sure they couldn't get through the door. Next was the mail. Mr. Henderson had given me the logs of my mother picking up my mail. That stopped today. I drove to the post office 3 blocks away and rented a secure P.O. box. I filed a change of address form for every single sensitive document: bank statements, tax forms, insurance policies. They would no longer come to the building. They would go to a locked metal box that required a key my mother did not have. By Friday, I felt like I was living in a fortress, but there was one piece of administrative housekeeping left, the one that felt the coldest, the one that felt the most permanent. I logged into the Straightline HR portal. I navigated to the section labeled Benefits and Beneficiaries. For 10 years, my life insurance policy, worth 3 times my annual salary, listed 2 beneficiaries, Sharon Bennett and Ray Bennett. My 401k listed Kara Bennett as the secondary beneficiary. It was standard. Who else would you leave it to? I looked at the names. If I died tomorrow, in a car crash or a plane incident, they would become millionaires. They would take the money I had earned through sleepless nights and missed holidays, and they would likely blow it on bad investments and new trucks within a year. I clicked edit. I removed Sharon. I removed Ray. I removed Kara. I sat there for a moment, the cursor blinking in the empty field. I didn't have a partner. I didn't have children. I thought about the local aviation scholarship fund that had helped me pay for my first year of college. I thought about the women's shelter downtown that helped victims of financial abuse get back on their feet. I typed in the name of the shelter. I allocated 100% of the life insurance payout to them. Then I typed in the name of the scholarship fund for my 401k. I hit save. I didn't send a text to tell them. I didn't make a Facebook post about it. I just did it. It was a secret that would only be revealed if I died. And the thought of their faces sitting in a lawyer's office, expecting a windfall, only to find out I had left it all to strangers, gave me a dark, quiet satisfaction. It wasn't spite. It was logic. They had treated me like a bank. I was simply closing the account. That evening, I drafted the email. Dr. Aris had told me to be clear. No jade justify, argue, defend, explain. Just state the facts. To Sharon Bennett, Ray Bennett, Kara Bennett. Subject updates. Regarding my home and finances. Mom, Dad, Kara. Following the events of last week, I am making some permanent changes to my living situation and financial boundaries. 1. The locks to my apartment have been changed. No one has a key. The front desk has been instructed to deny entry to anyone not on the lease. Do not attempt to access the building. 2. I have placed a freeze on my credit and filed a report regarding the unauthorized attempt to transfer utilities into Kara's name. Any further attempts to use my personal information will be met with an immediate police report for identity theft. 3. I am no longer available for financial assistance of any kind. Do not ask for loans, gifts, or emergency funds. I have canceled all automatic transfers. 4. If you wish to see me, we can meet in a public place for coffee, provided I am given 3 days' notice. Unannounced visits to my home or workplace will be considered harassment. I am taking some time to focus on my own stability. I will not be responding to texts or calls regarding these decisions. Harper. I read it over. It was cold. It was corporate. It was perfect. I hit send. Then I immediately turned off my phone. I knew what was coming. The rage, the weeping, the flying monkeys. But I had my filter system in place. The emails would go to a specific folder. The texts would be silenced. I had one final purchase to install. I opened the box that had arrived that afternoon. 2 small, white security cameras. I placed one on the bookshelf facing the front door. I placed the other in the hallway facing the bedroom and office. I synced them to my phone. The feed was crisp and clear. It felt paranoid. Maybe, but I remembered the measuring tape. I remembered the photo of Leo standing exactly where I was standing now. If they ever tried to come back, if they tried to pick the lock, or guilt a new concierge, or use a crowbar, I would have it in high definition. I would have the evidence. I opened the folder on my desktop, named the file. It was organized beautifully. Folder 1 Financials contains the 5 years of bank transfers, totaling nearly $45,000. Folder 2, the attempted move-in, contains the eviction notice photo, the final notice envelope, the lobby incident report I had requested from security. Folder 3, Identity Fraud, contains the credit inquiry screenshot and the correspondence with the electric company. Folder 4. Harassment contains screenshots of every text, post, and comment from the smear campaign. It was a dossier. It was a shield. 2 weeks passed. It was a Tuesday evening. I was sitting on my sofa, a glass of wine in hand, looking at my banking app. It was payday. Usually. Payday was a source of stress. I would watch the money come in, and then immediately mentally subtract the family tax, the tire money, the rent help, the guilt money. But tonight, the number just sat there. I paid my mortgage. I paid my utilities. I put money into my retirement, and there was still money left. I looked at my savings account. For the first time in 5 years, the balance had gone up by $2,000 in a single month. $2,000. That was freedom. That was a trip to Italy. That was a new car. That was safety. I realized then that I wasn't just rich in money. I was rich in energy. I hadn't spent a single hour this week listening to Kara complain about Dylan. I hadn't spent a single minute soothing my mother's manufactured crises. I had slept 8 hours every night. I had performed flawlessly at work, catching a routing error that saved the company $50,000 in fuel, earning a commendation from the VP. I looked around my apartment. The boys' room was still my office. The rug was still clean. The air was still quiet. My mother had asked if the empty apartment kept me warm. I took a sip of wine and felt the warmth spread through my chest. She was wrong. It wasn't empty. It was full of me. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for the crisis call. I had cut the phone line. I opened the camera app on my phone and looked at the live feed of my living room. I saw myself sitting there, calm, protected, solitary. I smiled at the camera. The revenge wasn't about hurting them. I didn't need to hurt them. They were doing a fine job of destroying themselves with their own chaos. My revenge was refusing to be the collateral damage. My revenge was this silence. My revenge was the growing number in my bank account. I was no longer the backup plan. I was the operation, and the operation was finally running under budget and ahead of schedule. I closed my eyes and listened to the rain. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The silence I had cultivated was shattered on a Tuesday morning, not by a text message or a banging at my door, but by a calendar invitation that appeared in my work inbox. Meeting request, urgent personnel matter. Sender Alara Vance, Director of Human Resources. Time, 10 o'clock. I stared at the screen. In my line of work, unscheduled meetings with HR are never good news. They usually mean a layoff, a compliance violation, or a termination. My heart began to pound, a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I was the operations lead. My record was spotless. I had just saved the company $50,000 in fuel costs the week prior. I walked into Mrs. Vance's office at 10 o'clock sharp. She did not smile. She gestured to the chair opposite her desk. "Harper," she said, folding her hands on the desk. "We received a phone call this morning on the ethics hotline. It was concerning enough that I needed to speak with you immediately." "A call?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Regarding what?" "Regarding your fitness for duty," Mrs. Vance said. She looked uncomfortable. The caller identified herself as your sister, Kara Bennett. She alleged that you are currently suffering from a severe mental health crisis, that you are abusing prescription medication to stay awake for your shifts, and that you have been making erratic, violent threats against your family. The room seemed to tilt. They had crossed the final line. They weren't just trying to invade my home anymore. They were trying to destroy the very thing that paid for it. They knew my job was my lifeline. If I lost my security clearance or my standing at Stratline, I would lose the apartment, and then I would be just as destitute as they were. It was a scorched earth tactic. If they couldn't have my success, they would ensure I didn't have it either. I felt a flash of pure, white-hot rage, but I pushed it down. I accessed the operations part of my brain. This was a turbulence event. I needed to stabilize the craft. "Mrs. Vance," I said, sitting up straighter. "What time was this call placed?" "Around 8:30 this morning." she replied. I see. I reached into my bag and pulled out my tablet. I had synced the file to it the night before. I placed the tablet on her desk and unlocked it. I'm going to show you a folder of evidence, I said, my voice clinical and cold. My sister and my mother are currently attempting to retaliate against me because I refused to allow them to move 7 people into my 1-bedroom apartment 2 weeks ago. When I refused, they threatened to ruin me. I swiped to the folder labeled harassment. Here is a text message from Kara Bennett dated 2 weeks ago, I said, pointing to the screen. I hope you rot. I will make everyone see who you really are. I swiped again. Here's a screenshot of a Facebook post from my mother, implying I am mentally unstable because I stopped paying their bills. And here, I swiped to the most damning piece of evidence, is the police report I filed regarding an identity theft attempt where they tried to transfer my utility bills into their name without my consent. Mrs. Vance leaned in, her eyes scanning the documents. Her expression shifted from professional concern to shock. They called you, I continued, because they know this job is my livelihood. They are trying to weaponize your department to coerce me into financial submission. I am not on medication. I am not unstable. I am the victim of a coordinated extortion attempt by my estranged family. Mrs. Vance looked at me, then back at the screen. She scrolled through the bank statements I had included, showing the thousands of dollars in transfers over the years. Ending abruptly 2 weeks ago, the narrative was clear, the money stopped, and the mental health crisis began. I see, she said quietly. She pushed the tablet back to me. I apologize. Harper, we have to investigate every call. You understand? I understand, I said, but I would like this incident logged as external harassment, and I would like security to be notified that neither Kara Bennett nor Sharon Bennett is allowed on the premises. Consider it done, Mrs. Vance said. She looked at me with a new kind of respect. And Harper, if you need legal resources, the Employee Assistance Program has referrals. I have it handled, I said. I walked out of her office with my head high, but my hands were shaking. They had tried to kill my career. They had tried to take the food out of my mouth. When I got back to my desk, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I felt a cold resolve hardening in my chest like concrete setting. There was no going back now. There was no reconciliation. This was a war for survival. I checked my phone during my lunch break. The social media campaign was escalating. Sharon had posted again, "It is so hard to watch a child spiral." She wrote, "We tried to intervene, to get her help, but she has pushed us all away. Please pray for Harper. She is not herself. The pressure of her job has broken her." It was a masterclass in manipulation. She was spinning the narrative so that if I did get fired, or if I did lash out, it would just prove her point. She was painting a target around me and handing the world a gun. My cousins were commenting, "So sad. Hope she gets help. Money isn't everything. Mental health matters." They were dissecting my life in the comment section, feigning concern while stripping me of my dignity. Then, a text came through from Kara. I stared at it. It wasn't the angry, screaming text I expected after her failed sabotage attempt. It was soft. "Harper, look, I am sorry about the call to your boss. Mom made me do it. She said it was the only way to get your attention." I didn't reply. I knew better. A second text followed. "We are desperate. I am not asking for money, I swear. I know you closed the bank. I respect that." I watched the 3 little dots dance on the screen. "I just need one small favor. Since we are staying at Mom's in Bellingham, the school district is terrible. The kids are miserable. I need to get them into the district near you, the one by the waterfront. All I need is for you to sign a proof of residency form, just saying we are staying with you. You do not have to let us in. We won't even come over. It is just a piece of paper so the kids can go to a good school. Please, for the kids." I read the message twice. Proof of residency. It sounded innocent. Just a signature. Just a piece of paper to help children get a better education. But I worked in operations. I knew how to look for the liability. If I signed a document stating they lived with me when they did not, that was fraud. It was perjury. It was a falsified government document. But more than that, if I established them as residents on paper, I gave them legal rights to my home. If they had that paper, they could call the police and say I was locking them out of their legal residence. The police would look at the signed affidavit and force me to open the door. It wasn't about school. It was a Trojan horse. I typed a reply, my fingers flying across the screen. No, I will not sign a false affidavit. That is fraud. Do not ask me again. Kara's response was immediate. The soft sister mask slipped off instantly. You selfish witch. You would deny kids an education. I'm going to post your number on every forum I can find. I'm going to tell everyone you hate children. I blocked her number. I didn't have the energy for her anymore. I sat there, rubbing my temples. The sun was setting over the airfield, casting long shadows across the tarmac. I felt tired, not sleepy, but weary in my bones. Then, my phone buzzed one more time. I looked at the screen, expecting another attack, but the name on the display made me pause. Dad. My father never called. In 33 years. I could count the number of times he had called me on one hand. He was a man who communicated through his wife, a silent passenger in the vehicle of our family dysfunction. I hesitated. Was this another trap? Was Sharon sitting next to him, feeding him lines I picked up? Hello. Harper. Ray's voice came through the line. He sounded old. He sounded like his voice was coming from the bottom of a well. Are you at work? I am, I said, guarding my tone. Did Mom put you up to this? No, he said. Your mother is at bingo. She took the car. There was a long silence. I could hear the clock ticking in his background. I could hear the absence of the screaming grandchildren. Where are the kids? I asked. Kara took them to the mall, he said, to blow off steam. With what money? I asked reflexively. I gave her my credit card. Ray said, I just wanted them out of the house. Harper, it is so loud. I can't think. He sounded defeated. He sounded like a man who had been drowning for 40 years and had just realized the water was over his head. Why are you calling, Dad? I saw something, he said. His voice trembled slightly. I was looking for a stamp in your mother's desk, in the bottom drawer, under the old checkbooks. I waited. My grip on the phone tightened. She has a file. Harper, Ray said. It is photocopies of your passport, your birth certificate, your social security card, and she has a copy of your signature. She must have traced it from an old birthday card or something. She has been practicing it on a notepad. The air left my lungs. It wasn't just an impulsive act of desperation. It was premeditated forgery. They weren't just trying to get into my apartment. They were preparing to become me. Why are you telling me this? I whispered. Because she was talking on the phone to Kara this morning. Ray said. I heard her. They were talking about the school district form. Sharon said she said if you wouldn't sign it, she would just sign it for you. She said she does it all the time. I felt sick. All the time? I think she signed your name on the lease for Kara's last car. Ray said. The one that got repossessed. I saw a letter from the collection agency addressed to you, but it came here. She hid it. My credit froze. That was why she was panicked. That was why she was escalating. She had been using my credit for who knows how long, and now that I had locked it down, the house of cards was collapsing. Dad, I said, you have to help me. You have to tell the truth. I know, Ray said. I have been a coward. Harper, I watched her do it. I watched her take from you. I told myself it was just family helping family. I told myself you had plenty. So it didn't hurt. It hurt, I said. It hurt every day. I know that now, he said. I look at Kara, she is 30 years old, and she can't function. We did that to her. We crippled her by never letting her fall, and we punished you for standing up. He took a jagged breath. I am tired. Harper, I am tired of the lies. I am tired of the noise. I am tired of being an accessory. Are you willing to say that to a lawyer? I asked. A lawyer. Ray sounded frightened. I am done playing games, Dad, I said. I am going to end this. I am going to set up a meeting, not at the house, not here, a neutral place. I am going to bring the evidence I have, and I need you to come and confirm what you saw in that drawer. If you do this, if you stand up for me this one time, maybe we can save what is left of this family, or at least, save me." There was a long pause. I held my breath. This was the man who had sat silently eating potatoes while his wife called me selfish. This was the man who had let me pay for his transmission while he watched TV. "Okay," Ray said softly. "Set it up, but don't tell your mother I'm coming with you. Tell her I'm driving her to the meeting to support her. If she knows I'm turning, she won't show up." "I will set it up," I said. "Thank you, Dad." "Don't thank me," he said, his voice breaking. "I should have done this 10 years ago." I hung up the phone. I sat in the darkening office. The blue light of my monitors washed over my face. I had the bank records. I had the harassment logs. I had the identity theft report. And now, I had the witness. I opened my email and composed a new message to Sharon Bennett, Kara Bennett, CC Ray Bennett. Subject: Final Settlement Meeting. I am prepared to discuss a resolution regarding the housing and financial disputes. I have booked a conference room at the Downtown Mediation Center for Friday at 2 p.m. I will be there with my documentation. If you want to resolve this without police involvement, you will be there too. I hit send. The trap was set. But it wasn't a trap for them. It was a trap for the lies. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the airfield. A massive cargo plane was taxiing to the runway, its lights blinking in the twilight. It was heavy, laden with tons of freight, yet it was about to defy gravity. I felt exactly like that plane. I was carrying a heavy load, but I was finally ready to take off. The Downtown Mediation Center was a place designed to neutralize emotion. The walls were painted a calming, sterile beige. The carpet was thick enough to absorb the sound of pacing feet. The conference table was an oval of polished oak, wide enough to ensure that opposing parties could not easily reach across and strangle one another. It was Friday at 2 p.m. I arrived 15 minutes early. I set up my station at the head of the table. I did not bring a purse or a coat. I brought only my laptop and a thick black accordion folder. I placed the folder on the table with a heavy, deliberate thud. It was not just paperwork. It was a map of the battlefield. At 2 o'clock exactly, the door opened. Sharon walked in first. She was wearing her Sunday church outfit, a floral blouse and a cardigan despite it being a Tuesday. It was a costume designed to signal harmlessness. She looked around the room with a performative sneer, as if the very air of the mediation center was beneath her. Kara followed, dragging her feet. She looked exhausted, her eyes puffy, clutching an oversized handbag as if it contained the last of her dignity. Dylan trailed behind her, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jeans, looking at the floor, and finally, my father, Ray. He looked pale. He met my eyes for a split second, gave a nearly imperceptible nod, and then looked away. They sat on the opposite side of the table. The mediator, a soft-spoken woman named Brenda, sat in the middle. "We are here to facilitate a conversation regarding," Brenda began. "We are here because my daughter has lost her mind." Sharon interrupted. She folded her hands on the table and looked at me with a gaze that was equal parts pity and malice. "Harper, look at this. Dragging your family into a legal office. Do you feel powerful now? Is this what you wanted?" "I want resolution," I said calmly. "And I want security." "Security?" Kara scoffed, her voice raspy. "You have a doorman. Harper, you have a fortress. We are the ones living out of suitcases in Mom's basement because you are too selfish to share." "Let us not start with name-calling," Brenda said gently. "It is not name-calling if it is true." Sharon snapped. She leaned forward. "Harper, I know you are stressed. I know the job is hard. But this paranoia, this idea that we are out to get you, it breaks my heart. We are your family. We love you." "If you loved me," I said, opening the black folder, "you wouldn't have stolen my identity." The room went silent. I pulled out the first stack of papers. I slid them across the oak table. "Exhibit A," I said, my voice flat and professional, the same tone I used when briefing pilots on storm fronts. Bank statements from the last 5 years, total transfers from Harper James to the Bennett family, $45,320. Sharon waved her hand dismissively. We have gone over this. You helped out. That is what families do. $45,000 is not help, I said. It is a second income, but that is the past. I am willing to write that off as a loss. What I am not willing to write off is this. I slid the second stack, the photos, the photo of Leo standing in my hallway, the photo of the measuring tape on my console table, the zoomed-in image of the notebook page titled Boys' Room. You did not just come for a visit, I said, looking at Kara. You measured my apartment, you assigned rooms, you planned a renovation of a property you do not own. Kara's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. We were just dreaming. We were just seeing what was possible. And this, I slid the third document, the credit inquiry report, the transcript from Seattle City Light. You tried to transfer the utilities into your name. You used my social security number to co-sign a sublease agreement I never saw. That was a misunderstanding, Sharon cried out. Kara was trying to be responsible. She wanted to pay the bills. You cannot pay bills on an account you do not own unless you are establishing residency, I said. This is fraud. Mom, it is a federal crime to use someone else's social security number without their consent. You are threatening your mother with jail, Sharon gasped, clutching her chest. After I gave you life, after I raised you. You are trying to take my life, I said, bit by bit, dollar by dollar, and now, square foot by square foot. I reached into the folder for the final item, the item that connected all the dots. I placed the screenshot of the eviction notice on the table, the one that had fallen out of the suitcase in the lobby, the one marked Final Notice. You told me you were coming for 2 weeks, I said. You told me the lease was up, but you were evicted, and not just evicted, I did a public record search on the address. I looked at Dylan. He flinched. The house was foreclosed on, I said. You haven't paid rent in 8 months. You didn't leave because the lease was up. You left because the sheriff was coming. Kara put her head in her hands. So, here is the reality, I continued. You have no money. You have no credit. You have an eviction on your record. You cannot rent a new place. The 2 weeks was a lie. You intended to move into my apartment and stay there indefinitely because you literally had nowhere else to go. You were going to use tenancy laws to make it impossible for me to kick you out. It wasn't like that, Kara sobbed. We just needed time. Time, I asked. How much time? Just until things settled, Dylan blurted out. It was the first time he had spoken. We just needed a place for a few months until the business took off again. We weren't going to steal the condo. Harper, we just needed a base. A few months, I repeated. Kara told me 2 weeks. You say a few months. But with an eviction on your record and no income, a few months becomes a few years. You were moving in. Permanently. So what if we were... Sharon slammed her hand on the table. The mask of the sweet old lady fell away completely, revealing the predator underneath. You have a spare room. You have money. Why is it so evil for you to share it with your sister who is drowning? You are sitting on a gold mine and watching them starve. You are a monster. Harper. I am not a monster, I said. I am the owner. I looked at my father. He was staring at the table, his hands trembling. Dad, I said softly. Sharon whipped her head around to look at him. Ray, tell her. Tell her she is being ridiculous. Ray took a deep breath. He looked at Sharon, then he looked at me. And for the first time in my life, I saw him choose. Give her the file. Sharon, Ray said. His voice was quiet, but in the acoustically dampened room, it sounded like a gunshot. Sharon froze. What? The file, Ray said, louder this time. The one in your bottom drawer, the photocopies of her passport, the practice sheets where you traced her signature. Kara looked up, shocked. Mom, What is he talking about? He is talking about the identity theft kit Mom keeps in her desk, I said. The one she uses to open credit cards in my name whenever you need a bailout. Ray, shut up, Sharon hissed. Her eyes were wide with panic. You don't know what you are talking about. I am done, Sharon, Ray said. He stood up. He wasn't a tall man, but in that moment, he looked giant. I am done watching you bleed her dry. I am done lying. I saw the papers. I saw you practicing her signature on the notepad. You told me you were signing the school forms for the grandkids, but you were signing a loan application. You traitor, Sharon whispered. I am not a traitor, Ray said. I am a father, and I should have been one 30 years ago. He looked at me. I am sorry. Harper. Thank you. Dad, I said. I turned back to the table. I had them. The king had fallen. The queen was cornered. I pulled out the final document. It was a legal agreement I had drafted with a lawyer the day before. Here are your options, I said. I pushed the document toward Kara. Option A, I said. You sign this. It is a binding agreement stating that you have no claim to my property. It states that you will cease all harassment of me and my employer. It states that you will never attempt to use my personal information again. It requires you to make a public post on social media retracting your previous statements about my mental health. I looked at Sharon. And you? I said. You will return the file Dad is talking about. You will return the spare key you swore you lost. And you will sign this document agreeing that if any new credit line is opened in my name, I will immediately file a police report naming you as the suspect. And option B? Dylan asked nervously. Option B, I said, closing my folder. I take this entire folder to the police station 3 blocks from here. I file charges for identity theft, fraud, and harassment. I show them the evidence of the utility transfer. I show them the witness statement my father is prepared to give regarding the forgery. I looked at Sharon dead in the eye. Identity theft is a felony. Mom, you will go to prison. And Kara, with an eviction and a fraud charge. Child Protective Services will have a lot of questions about where those 4 kids are sleeping. The silence stretched. It was heavy and suffocating. Sharon looked at Ray, hoping for him to cave, to say he was joking, but Ray just stood there, staring at the wall, refusing to look at her. She looked at Kara, but Kara was looking at the eviction notice, defeated. Sharon's face twisted. It wasn't sorrow. It was pure, unadulterated spite. Fine, she spat. You want to be alone? Be alone. But don't you come crying to me when you are old and nobody cares about you. I won't, I said. She grabbed her purse. She stood up so abruptly her chair tipped over. She didn't sign the paper. She didn't look at Ray. She just marched to the door. I have no daughter, she said as she grabbed the handle. And I have no bank, I replied. She slammed the door. The room was quiet again. Kara looked at the paper. Her hand was shaking. She picked up the pen. I just wanted the kids to be safe, she whispered. Then be their mother, I said. Not my dependent. She signed. Dylan signed. Ray reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver key, the old spare key. She gave this to me to hold while she drove, Ray said. He slid it across the table. I put my hand over it. It was cold. It was the physical manifestation of my anxiety for 3 years. I will get the file from her desk when I get home, Ray said. I will mail it to your P.O. box. Thank you, I said. Are you? Ray hesitated. Are you going to be okay? I think so, I said. For the first time? Ray nodded. He touched Kara's shoulder. Come on, let's go. We have to figure out a real plan. They left. I sat alone in the conference room for a long time. I listened to the hum of the air conditioner. I looked at the signed document. I looked at the key. I didn't feel triumphant. There is no triumph in realizing your mother sees you as a credit score. But I felt light. The tether was cut. I packed up my folder. I walked out of the building and into the Seattle drizzle. I took a cab home. When I got to my building, the concierge waved at me. Good afternoon, Ms. James. No visitors today. No visitors, I agreed. And none expected. I took the elevator up to the 33rd floor. I walked down the hall. I stood in front of door 33B. I looked at the new silver lock. I put my key in. It turned smoothly. Click. I stepped inside. The apartment was exactly as I had left it. Quiet, clean, mine. I walked to the closet and pulled out my suitcase. Not the one for work. The one for travel. I opened it on the bed. For years. I had been saving money for emergencies, for Kara's tires, for Mom's guilt trips. I opened my banking app. The balance was higher than it had ever been. I walked to my dresser and started packing. Not because I was running away, but because I could finally go somewhere just for me. Maybe Italy. Maybe just a weekend at a spa. It didn't matter. I placed a sweater in the suitcase. The war was over. The occupation was failed. I zipped the suitcase shut. The sound was sharp and definitive. I walked to the window and looked out at the planes taking off from SeaTac in the distance. Thousands of people going thousands of places. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the ground crew ensuring everyone else got to fly. I was the pilot. I picked up my bag. Boarding time, I whispered to the empty room. And I smiled. Thank you so much for listening to Harper's story. It is a hard journey to realize that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to walk away from the people who are supposed to love you. I would love to hear from you. Where are you tuning in from today? Are you listening from your car, your kitchen, or maybe your own quiet sanctuary? Please let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and press the hype button so we can share this message of strength with more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong, and remember you hold the keys to your own life.